The cover-up is always worse than the crime, and the cover-up that is the topic of this video happens to be particularly sad and pitiful to watch. Mostly because you cannot cover up something performing as poorly as the Rings of Power, especially when you spend so much money in hope that it will bring you a profit. Even if you are a generous audience member, the best you could say is that the Rings of Power was okay. Nothing special, just meh. Which is probably why a rumor that the showrunners are being sidelined is circulating, and perhaps there is more to this than meets the eye. Not too long ago, however, the two showrunners, McKay and Payne, gave a disastrous interview to The Hollywood Reporter. In that very interview, on the 5th of October, the showrunners of Rings of Power called out the evil fans of Lord of the Rings, describing them as patently evil, fascist-adjacent trolls. Payne and McKay reasserted their loyalty to the lore, which may sound reasonable given that Amazon paid $250 million for the IP rights, but does not really make sense if you have seen The Rings of Power, where major deviations from the underlying material are self-evident. Also, rather amusingly, in that interview, Payne and McKay mentioned manipulative fan reviews, all while managing to throw in a comment about Giorgia Meloni, the new Prime Minister of Italy. In other words, they had time to comment on everything but the quality of the series they produced. Obviously, if you subjected yourself to watching all 8 episodes, secretly hoping that the Rings of Power will rise from ashes and do better towards the end of season 1, you know that nothing of the sort happened. Instead, it got worse. Halbrand was Sauron, and the stranger appears to have been Gandalf. There are only 3 rings, and by now there is nothing that can save the Rings of Power. With the finale of the series out, the real effort to minimize the obvious yet painful truth has begun, the truth being total incompetence and lack of talent of the showrunners. First, Amazon tried to hype up season 2.
You know, all these wonderful canon characters that you've met, season 1, and then there are additional canon characters that we will get to in future seasons. And if you know the lore, anybody is fair game who might have been a part of the world at this time.
Although this was not very successful, because in the very video they released on YouTube, the showrunners basically admitted they have no plan for Theo, one of the characters they created, because the reality is they do not really care much for the source material.
Theo was another character who had a dark side. Does he have a lore identity that'll be revealed?
It would be no fun if we were to answer something like that, but there are all kinds of destinies in Middle-earth, and Theo's is yet to be written. We'll have to see where he ends up.
Then we had to endure an overly cheerful podcast where Felicia Day pretended to be surprised by Sauron's identity.
We made it to the finale, y'all! Let's go. I'm your host, Felicia Day. Oh, y'all, I cannot believe Halbrand had me fooled the whole time. Sauron was hiding in plain sight.
Yet, even her cheerful and joyous attitude could not cover up the reality. Most people were not surprised. Most people didn't care.
Don't even care.
And now we have entered step of the cover-up attempts. This is the part where McKay and Payne are trying to save their jobs while also trying to appease the fanbase, which is something quite difficult to balance. So to achieve this, they spoke to Vanity Fair, and here is the article. The very title is preposterous, and sadly the reality is that Halbrand being Sauron was so poorly hidden that even me, having slept through some of the episodes, I was able to guess his identity. But this is just the beginning of this interview, it gets way worse. McKay explains the reasoning behind using Galadriel's dagger to make the 3 Rings of Power. I would say that if you need to explain why this dagger being melted has a symbolic meaning and an emotional impact, you probably have not done your job well. I am the most easily moved person. I cry like a baby when watching even not very good shows and films, yet Galadriel's dagger being melted had no impact on me whatsoever. Obviously, I could say that this attempt to include meaningful moments and symbolic meanings in Rings of Power has mostly failed, but then again, the show is so mediocre, one can no longer have any high expectations. And so you may be wondering, how do these two showrunners measure the success of their creation? expectation. They cannot measure success by looking at the audience reviews, as that would be the ultimate evidence of their total failure, but by now it is also clear they cannot really measure success by financial performance of Season 1, as there are signs that Rings of Power is underperforming compared to expectations and that Amazon seems rather cagey when it comes to showing viewership figures. So in the Vanity Fair interview, Payne says that success means that people engage with the material in a way that impacts them. And he then says they received notes from families who were brought together by Rings of Power. I don't think he is lying. I think there may be something to this after all. I would say my family was brought together by waiting for the reviews from Council of the Rings every week, where I would hear where each episode would be torn apart with a great amount of humor. The showrunners in the interview conclude that some people were emotionally moved by their series. Again, so was I. The Rings of Power had more cringe than the Ultimatum. Yet somehow I doubt this is the emotional depth they were going for.
I'm super attracted to you specifically.
In other words, instead of admitting that they messed up and promising to be better, Payne and McKay try to indicate that they will take in some feedback from the fans. This sounds promising, yet at the same time they are clearly not backing out of their assertions about haters and trolls. Obviously, something is not right here. Either the audience is correct and the series is forgettable mediocre, or the audience is just a bunch of haters. So which one is it, and when will they stop and admit that they messed up?